The slides covers formulating the method. Last time we provided an overview of the introduction in the proposal or research article. Once the introduction has been completed, you must describe the methodology for the research. Typically, this section is labeled Method. Please note that the reminder of this book is focused on the method. Important aspects of the study: who the participants are, instruments, procedures, design and analysis. How to measure and analyze the results. How to design the study. The purpose of the method section is to explain how the study was conducted. The standard rule is that the description should be thorough enough for a competent researcher to reproduce.
The purpose of planning the method is to eliminate any alternative or rival hypotheses. This really means that when you design the study correctly, and the results are as predicted, the only explanation is what you did in the research. In research, we want to use Mexican principle: maximize true variance, or increase the odds that the real relationship or explanation will be discovered, minimize error variance, or reduce all the mistakes that could creep into the study to disguise the true relationship, and control extraneous variance, or make sure that rival hypotheses are not responsible for results. 2 principles for planning experiments. 1. Less is more. For example, graduate students want to conduct meaningful studies that address and solve important problems. To do this, they often plan complex studies with many IVs and EVs, but the study often fails because of sheer complexity. 2. Simple is better. Keep your study straightforward so that when you find something, you can understand and interpret what it means. Understanding your data is really an important concept. Although fancy statistical programs are nice and informative, there is no substitute for plotting data graphically and evaluating it carefully. This section describes how and why the participants are selected and which of their characteristics are pertinent to the study. These are questions to consider when selecting participants. 1. Are participants with special characteristics necessary for your research? For example, the number of participants, like how many participants are needed, the age of participants, do you need children or elderly, or the sex of participants, do you need females, males, or both genders, or the characteristics that are pertinent to the study: level of training, trained or untrained, level of performance, experts or novices, size, weight, fatness, special types, athletes, cyclists, runners. 2. Can you obtain the necessary permission and cooperation from the participants? 3. Can you find enough participants? You will have to make sure that subjects are consistent with purpose and available. The characteristics of participants that you identify and report must be clearly specified. When dealing with humans, it is particularly important to obtain informed consent from humans and ensure the protection and care of animals. Informed consent and protecting participants' rights are ethical considerations. We will talk more about this issue later. Information about the instruments, apparatuses, or tests used to collect data is used to generate the dependent variables in the study. Considering the following points when selecting tests and instruments: what is the reliability and validity of the measures? How difficult is it to obtain the measures? Do you have access to the instruments, tests, or apparatuses needed? Do you know how to administer the tests or use the equipment? Do you know how to evaluate participants' test performance? Will the tests, instruments, or apparatuses yield a reasonable range of scores for the participants you have selected? Will the participants be willing to spend whatever time is required for you to administer the tests or instruments? You should describe how the data were obtained, how tests were given, and who gave them. You should detail the setup of the testing situation and instructions given to the participants. How data are collected, when, where, how much time is required. Do you have pilot data? Planning the treatments: how long, how intense, how often? Verification of treatment or adherence. Do you have pilot data? Have you selected appropriate treatment for the participants? The procedures section contains most of the details that allow another researcher to replicate the study. It generally includes 1. Steps in order. 2. Timing of the study, time taken for different procedures, time between different procedures. 3. Instructions given to the participants. 4. Briefing, debriefing, safeguards. The majority of the methodological flaws can be easily corrected with pilot work. Maybe you will seek information about appropriate procedures from related literature. Procedures for intensity, frequency, and duration of experimental treatment are often readily available. However, it is important to remember that procedures in one area do not necessarily work well in another. Design is the key to controlling the outcomes from experimental and quasi-experimental research. The independent variables are manipulated in an attempt to judge their effects on the dependent variables. A well-designed study is one in which the only explanation for change in the dependent variable is how the subjects were treated in dependent variable. The design should enable the researchers to eliminate all rival or alternative hypotheses. The design requires a section heading in the method for experimental and quasi-experimental research. The plans for data analysis must also be reported. In most studies, some type of statistical analysis is used, but there are some exceptions, for example, historical/qualitative research. In summary, when designing the methods, review the literature, plan carefully, pilot extensively, and anticipate problems.